Hello, boys and girls, and moms and dads, and anybody else who's out there. My name is Jon Sundell, and I am here to give you a little concert of fairy tales and myths and some folk songs along the summer theme of Imagine Your Story. I know you guys have been hanging around home more than you would like, and it's kind of rough. But I want to tell you that this summer's theme is just perfect for our situation, because if you use your imagination, you read lots of books, especially if they're fantasy, why, it'll take you to places and experiences which you can't have in real life. Not only now, but ever. Now, I used to be a children's librarian. I was in the public library for 22 years and the schools for 10 years. But before that, I was a professional storyteller and a folk singer. Been doing that for nearly 50 years. So I like to mix it all up, and I'm going to start off with a song. It's a song I wrote using the melody to the old African-American spiritual, I Ain't Gonna Study War No More. Now you can help me not just singing along on the chorus and the verse, but also doing the rhythm. On the verses, there's a neat little clapping rhythm that you can do. I'll clap it with you at first, and then later on you can catch on to how I'm playing the guitar. I'm gonna sit down under a shady tree with a far-off fantasy, with a far-off fantasy, with a far-off fantasy. You're gonna sit down under a shady tree with a far-off fantasy, gonna read all the summer through. I'm gonna amplify my mind, I'm gonna open up my heart, I'm gonna make every day feel new. I'm gonna tickle my funny bone, I'm gonna zap my scary zone, I'm gonna read all the summer through. When Zeus lets loose his lightning bolt, I'm gonna give my mind a jolt, gonna give my mind a jolt, gonna give my mind a jolt. When Zeus lets loose his lightning bolt, I'm gonna give my mind a jolt, I'm gonna read all the summer through. Help me sing now. I'm gonna amplify my mind, I'm gonna open up my heart, I'm gonna make every day feel new. I'm gonna tickle my funny bone, I'm gonna zap my scary zone, I'm gonna read all the summer through. When Jack plants his magic beam, there'll be a wild and crazy scene, there'll be a wild and crazy scene, there'll be a wild and crazy scene. When Jack plants his magic beam, there'll be a wild and crazy scene. They're gonna read all the summer through. Help me sing the chorus. I'm gonna amplify my mind, I'm gonna open up my heart, I'm gonna make every day feel new. I'm gonna tickle my funny bone, I'm gonna zap my scary zone, I'm gonna read all the summer through. There'll be Rumpelstiltskin spinning gold, Cinderella's tale be told, Cinderella's tale be told, Cinderella's tale be told. Be Rumpelstiltskin spinning gold, Cinderella's tale be told. Gonna read all the summer through. I'm gonna amplify my mind, I'm gonna open up my heart, I'm gonna make every day feel new. I'm gonna tickle my funny bone, I'm gonna zap my scary zone, I'm gonna read all the summer through. There'll be giants, trolls, and witches too, stirring up a smelly stew, stirring up a smelly stew, stirring up a smelly stew. There'll be giants, trolls, and witches too, stirring up a smelly stew. Gonna read all the summer through. Last time, I'm gonna amplify my mind, I'm gonna open up my heart, I'm gonna make every day feel noodly-oodly-oo. I'm gonna tickle my funny bone, gonna zap my scary zone, I'm gonna read all the summer through. All right. I'm going to start out my stories with a myth because those are the oldest kind of folk tale. Myths go back 500, 1,000, 2,000 or more years. They're usually about gods and goddesses and creation, stuff like that. That's why they're in the 290 section of the library instead of the 398.2 with the other folk tale. So I'm going to tell you a creation myth that comes from the Native Americans living along the northwest coast of the Pacific Ocean. All the way from the top of the United States, Oregon and Washington, up through Canada, into Alaska, there are many tribes who believed in a character called Raven. Raven is a kind of a big cousin to the crow. And they believed that he was involved in creation and he was involved in helping out people. Now, many of these people have beautifully painted lodges and totem poles, and many of the images that they put on those totem poles and those lodges are of Raven. But another interesting thing about Raven is that he is a trickster. So the stories about him make for some pretty interesting fare. So this story is about how Raven brought light to the people. Now, I got it from several different places, but probably the source I drew on the most for it is called Raven, A Trickster Tale from the Pacific Northwest by Gerald Mcdermott. Won a Caldecott honor for his In the beginning, the world was in darkness. The sky was dark. The earth was dark. The ocean was dark. The people were cold and miserable. Raven cared about the people. He felt sorry for them, and he said to himself, I will bring them light. And so one day, he flew off into the sky. He flew over the mountains, and he flew over the valleys, and he flew over the rivers and the lakes, and he flew along the ocean. He flew for several days until finally, way off in the distance, he thought he saw some light at the edge of the water. And so he flew up into a pine tree, and perched there in the pine tree, he looked down at where the light was coming from. It was coming from a huge lodge, a log lodge. And out of the lodge was coming a pretty girl. And she walked down to the water, and she had a basket. She dipped the basket into the water. She lifted it to her lips, and she drank the water. Well, as Raven watched her, he had an idea. Raven turned himself into a pine needle, and he drifted down into the water. Well, the next time that girl filled up her basket, in went the pine needle into the water, and down went the water into the girl along with the pine needle. Well, in about 9 months' time, the girl had a baby. The baby had piercing black eyes, and he had shiny black hair, and he had a great big nose. The baby looked a little bit like a raven. In fact, the baby was Raven Child, reborn as a human baby. Oh, the girl loved Raven Child, and her father did too. Her father loved Raven Child. He would make him little toys out of wood. He would whittle them with his knife, and he'd come every day and he would watch Raven play. He invited the elders, and they all sat around watching Raven, fascinated by him. Well, one day as Raven was playing, he spotted a very colorful box. Out of the box was coming light. Raven pointed at the box, He went, "Nada, nada." The girl was kind of puzzled. "Nada, nada." The girl said, "What does he want?" Her father said, "He wants the box. Bring him the box." The girl brought the box over to Raven. She lifted the top off, but inside was another box. Well, she took that box out of the other box, set it down, took the top off. Inside was another box. Raven was starting to get a little anxious. "No, no, no, no," he said. Well, she took the top off that one. Inside was another box. She took the top off that one. Raven was going, "No, no, no, no." But finally, she took the top off that one. And inside was a burning ball of light. It was the sun. She took it out of the box and she gave it to Raven. Raven stopped crying and he started to laugh. He looked at the sun and then he started rolling it around the floor, laughing the whole time and playing with the ball of light that was the sun. And the chief and all the elders were watching him, fascinated. And then suddenly, before anybody realized what was happening, Raven turned back into a bird. With his great big beak, he grabbed the sun and he flew off through the smoke hole in the ceiling into the sky. Left everybody in the lodge stunned at what had happened. Raven flew off into the sky with the sun in his beak. And he flew over the mountains, and he flew over the valleys, he flew over the rivers, and he flew over the lakes, and he flew till he came to his people. And then he took the sun and threw it up into the sky. And that is where the sun has been to this day. That's how Raven brought the sun to his people. And to this day, they remember that. And whenever they see a raven, they are careful to feed it. I'd like to follow up that bird story with a bird song. And I want to come east from northwestern North America to southeastern North America, over the North Carolina mountains, around Asheville and Boone and all around the Blue Ridge and the Smoky Mountains area that's so rich in folklore, in folk songs and folk tales. This is a song called Little Birdie that I have been singing forever, and I just love this song. Now, it doesn't tell a story, but you know what? It kind of suggests a story. It asks a bunch of questions of a bird, or really birds. You see, in this song, there's a robin redbreast, and there's a bluebird. The fella singing the song asked the robin, "Little birdie, what makes your breast so red?" He says, "After all I've been through, it's a wonder I ain't dead." "Little birdie, what makes your coat so blue?" "Oh, it's because I've been a-grievin'. I've been a-grievin' after you." Little birdie, what makes you fly so high?" "It's because I've got a true little heart, and I do not fear to die." And then the chorus seems to have a story all its own. It says, little birdie, come and sing to me your song. I've a short time to be here with you, and a long time to be gone." I hope you'll help me sing the chorus. The verses and the chorus all start out the same, but you'll get so you can identify when the chorus is coming. All right. Now, so I am going to start out with just a little bit of banjo picking on this thing. By the way, the banjo, even though it's played by mostly white folks up in the mountains and the countryside, it really came here with 3 strings with black folks when they came over from Africa. Here's the chorus. Little birdie, little birdie, come and sing to me your song. I've a short time to be here with you, and a long time to be gone. Well, little birdie, what makes you fly so high? It's because I have a true little heart, and I do not fear to die. Here's the chorus. Little birdie, come and sing to me your song. I've a short time to be here with you, and a long time to be gone. Well, little birdie, what makes your breast so red? After all I have been through, it's a wonder I ain't dead. Little birdie, come and sing to me your song. I've a short time to be here with you, and a long time to be gone. Well, little birdie, what makes your coat so blue? It's because I've been a-grieving after you. Last chance. Little birdie, come and sing to me your song. I've a short time to be here with you, and a long time to be gone. Said, and a long time to be gone. Well, it's time for a fairy tale. The best known fairy tales here in the United States are probably the ones that were collected by two German brothers, Joseph and Wilhelm Grimm, in the 1800s in Germany. Probably because a bunch of them were made into movies by Walt Disney. See if you can guess which ones these are. How about this? Sleeping Beauty. How about this one? It's easy. Little Red Riding Hood. This one? Rumpelstiltskin, the one that was in the song. And this? Hansel and Gretel. Yep, you got them. So it's fun to put those ones into a song, but I figured it'd be more interesting for telling to tell you something you're not already familiar with. So I'm going to tell you an African-American fairy tale that is kind of like Hansel and Gretel, but I like it a lot better. I like it for a couple of reasons. One is it's got some wonderful song parts in it. This story comes from John's Island, off the coast of South Carolina, which is home to people known as Gullah, who have preserved many ancestral traditions from Africa. It comes from Janie Hunter, a remarkable storyteller, religious singer, quilter, broom maker, and folk medicine practitioner. She said, "I try to teach my children, my 7 daughters and 6 sons, and my 95 grandchildren, so these stories won't die out." Folk singer Guy Carawan learned the tale of Barney McCabe from Miss Hunter while he and his wife Candy were living on the island and writing a book about its people and traditions. I, in turn, learned it from Guy. Now, the most essential ingredient in fairy tales is magic. There's magic tools that can do special things. There's magic transformations. There's magic motifs, elements of all kinds. And there's all kinds of characters that we sometimes call stock characters. It's like giants, trolls, witches, fairies. Mostly you find like the little people from Ireland. They're smaller, but they don't have wings. and a tengu that you'll find a little later in a Japanese tale. These are called stock characters. They usually don't have a proper name or a nickname. They're just called by the type of creature that they are. All right, so here are the three singing parts, and I would love to have you help me out with these. The first one is the boy Jack calling his three dogs. He calls them like this. Barney McCabe, doodly-doo, so boy, don't you hear me calling you? And the dogs call back like this. Faster, faster, coming all the time. Faster, faster, coming all the time. The witch has got a song too. It goes like this when she's chopping a tree. A chip off the old block, chip off the new block, chip off the old block, chip off the new block. Now you're going to see in this story some balloons. You see, when my wife Vivian and I do live concerts, we sometimes like to include balloons. You get to see Vivian or me making balloons while I'm telling the story, and then after the concert we make the balloons for you to take home. Well, sorry you can't take these home, but I thought I'd give you a little taste of it, and maybe you'll come see me next summer and you'll get to take some balloons home. One beautiful day in autumn, Jack and Mary finished up their chores and they went and asked their mama if they could go for a long walk.
Yes, children, that's all right, she said, but be careful.
We will, Mama, they said. But just to be on the safe side, Jack poured out a glass of milk and set it on the table. If you see that glass of milk turn to blood, you know we're in trouble, Mama. Turn loose my three dogs, Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy, and they'll come and help us. Jack went to the barn, got 3 grain of corn, and put those in his pocket, and they set off. Well, it was a glorious day in the middle of October. The trees were all dressed out in red and gold, sparkling in the sun. They went on across the field and into the woods. In some places, a lot of leaves had fallen, and they'd gather them together into a pile and jump around in it, laughing and having a big time. They walked along the trail, singing songs and telling stories and telling jokes, and they were having so much fun that they didn't pay attention to the time. Well, meanwhile, that sun had been working its way across the sky, and there it was suddenly looking through the trees at him, perched on the horizon. Mary says, Jack, that sun is about to set. We're too far from home to get back before dark. We better find a place to spend the night. Well, they walked a little further and they come to a little cabin out there in the woods. They knocked on the door. An old woman opened up.
Yes, children, what is it?
Grandma, said Jack, that's a term of respect for an old person. Grandma, my sister and me, we've been walking all day and not paying attention to the time. It's too late for us to get home before dark. We were wondering if we could spend the night with you.
Why, sure, children, come right on in.
That old woman took them into the house and into the kitchen, and there on the kitchen table were 3 plates set out full of fried chicken, greasy greens, and mashed potatoes with the peas stuck down in the middle of them, like Jack and Mary liked them. Well, they ate their fill of that food, and then the old woman brought out a big old apple cobbler with vanilla ice cream on top. They ate that ice cream, and they were full up. She took them up a little ladder into a loft, and there in the loft was an old-timey feather bed. Now, you've probably not slept on a feather bed, but I want to tell you it's something soft. Those feathers, when you lie down in them, it's just like you're lying down on a cloud. For 15 seconds had passed, Jack was out cold. He was sleeping away. Now, Mary, she was real sleepy too, but she was suspicious of that old woman. She kept herself awake. She listened. Down in the kitchen she heard, "Penny, get your knife, Penny, get your knife, Penny, get your knife, gonna shock 'em, a humpback, a Josie back, a C and Tony, your mama and your daddy, you tell me so, seesaw, you tell me so, tamaram-a-ram." Well, she heard that song in, and she thought she saw something glitter there in the kitchen. She leaned her head out to the side, and it was a knife. She didn't want to find out what she planned to do with that knife. She hit Jack in the ribs with her elbow, said, "Jack, get on out of bed. That woman's a witch, I'm sure of it, and she's coming to get us. Come on, Jack." Jack and Mary got out of that bed. They went to the window. Jack pulled out a grain of corn, threw it on the ground. Up sprung a ladder. Jack and Mary run down that ladder and took off running. Not a minute too soon, 'cause up come that old witch into the loft. She didn't see Jack and Mary in the bed. She went to the window, and there was the ladder. Boom! Down the ladder she went, running after him. She was fast. She was old, but she was fast. And in just a couple minutes, she was hot on their trail. Jack turned around, seen her coming, reached in his pocket, grabbed a second grain of corn, and threw it down. Boom! Up sprung a great big tall pine tree. Jack and Mary went to climbing up that tree, and along came that old witch with Tommy Hawk. Tommy Hawk turned to an axe, and she set into chopping. A chip off the old block, a chip off the new block, a chip off the old block, a chip off the new block. Help me sing it. A chip off the old block, a chip off the new block, a chip off the old block, a chip off the new block. Jack knew it was time to call those three dogs. He called out, "Barney McCabe, doodly-doo, so boy, don't you hear me calling you?" Well, those words drifted on out of that forest all the way back to their house, their little farmhouse, through the kitchen window, over that glass of milk, and it turned to blood. His mama seen that. She run and turned loose those three dogs. They called back and started running. Faster, faster, coming all the time. 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 And that old witch a-chopping. Chip off the old block, chip off the new block, chip off the old block, chip off the new block. Jack calling Barney McCabe, doodly-doo, so boy, don't you hear me calling you? And those dogs called back. Faster, faster, coming all the time. 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 That old witch could hear them howling and calling through the woods. She lit back with that old axe one more time and whack! Hit that tree with all her might. Jack and Mary could feel it shake, and they heard the crack, and then that tree started to lean. Jack turned to look for those three dogs, and there they stood at the edge of a river too wild and wide for them to cross. He reached in his pocket, grabbed a third grain of corn, and threw it down. Up sprung a bridge. And just as that old tree crackled and fell to the ground, that old witch run for Jack and Mary, but those three dogs grabbed her and drug her off. And the bridge bent, and that's the way that story. For my second fairy tale, I'm going to take us all the way across the world, to the east end of Asia, to Japan. I spent a year in Japan in 1970 when I was 23 years old. That was 50 years ago. Here I am at my friend Wagatsuma's house, and I'm mashing soybeans with a mallet while his mother helps me. This is Wagatsuma himself. We're in Deer Park, and he's feeding one of the friendly deer. There are lots of beautiful parks, and there are also beautiful temples and shrines, ancient religious temples and shrines. People often go there to ask for assistance, to make a prayer. You can go for better health. You can go ask for money if you're poor. If you got an exam, you can ask for good luck on your exam. And here's a little neighborhood festival right behind my apartment, and they're putting on a very old play. The people have on masks, and there's somebody playing the drum. But the thing you guys probably know about Japan is not the old stuff, it's the new stuff. Here's Pikachu. Everybody knows about Pikachu, the most famous of the Pokemon. But you may not know that there are lots of old, fascinating characters in folklore and mythology. Spirits and supernatural creatures, colorful demons. This is one of them. This is a Tengu. You can find him in the modern manga comics and in the video games, but he goes back more than 1,000 years. Originally, they considered them a demon. He was always into mischief, maybe kidnapping people. But sometimes he's considered a good minor god. For instance, there are Tengu who guard the forests as friendly spirits. In the last couple of hundred years, in the folk tales, often the Tengu is a humorous character, somebody who's easily fooled. Tengu children are stock characters in this story. The main character is Badger. Badger is a woodland animal that we have in the United States. Little bit larger than a raccoon and pretty similar. Badger in Japanese folklore is a trickster. And he's also a shapeshifter. So there's our motif of transformation. And you'll also find the motif of a magic tool in the form of a fan. One morning, Badger was walking along through the woods. He was chewing on a nice tasty rice cake, and he heard a little noise. It sounded like this. Well, Badger came up close to the noise, and he stood on the outside of a clearing, and there in the clearing was a bunch of little Tengu children. One of them had a fan in his hands, and he was playing with it. He would take the fan and he would fan his nose, and as he did so, his nose would get longer until it hit a tree. Boop! And then it stopped. He then turned the fan over and he fanned his nose again. His nose came back and the Tengu children laughed. And then he'd do it again. Well, Badger looked at that fan and he said to himself, I could make a lot of money with that fan. He walked into the clearing and he said, Good morning, little Tengu children. Which of you would like to have a nice, tasty rice cake like I've got here? If you would, close your eyes and hold out your hand. Well, all of the Tengu children did that. They closed their eyes, and then he added, and if you'd like 2 rice cakes, hold out both hands. Well, as they did that, the fan dropped to the ground. Badger grabbed it up as quick as he could, stuck it in his belt, and ran off through the woods. Before they knew it, Badger was gone. The children opened their eyes. There was no Badger, there was no magic fan, and there were no rice cakes. They felt pretty bad about it. But Badger, he felt great. He had gotten himself a magic fan, and he was going to earn some money with that fan. He walked out of the woods, and he walked along a little road. Now, as he walked along the road, he saw some interesting things which helped him while away the time. He saw some people gathering in hay. He saw a farmhouse that was made with hay on the roof. He walked along the seashore. High up, he could see the ocean down below. He could see the rocks. He continued on, and he came to a place where there was a famous shrine. He saw a girl in a beautiful kimono kneeling down and feeding the pigeons. He walked on, and eventually he came to where, in a bend of the road, he saw that the houses were growing closer together, closer and closer. He came to a place where there were a bunch of kids playing some games. He saw a little girl who was feeding a stone horse, and some other girls who were laughing in the woods, and they stopped to look at him. Finally, he started walking through the neighborhoods, and he was looking for something. He was looking for the fanciest, biggest house he could find, because he figured there would live the richest family in the city. And after a while, he found what he was looking for. There was a big, beautiful house with a nice, big green lawn, and just perfectly, there was a pretty young woman, pretty girl, asleep on the grass. Badger took his fan out of his belt, and he walked up to where that girl was. She had the cutest little button nose, and he started to fan. And as he fanned, out grew her nose. When it was about 6 feet long, he stopped. He put away the fan, and he walked away. When that girl woke, she thought she saw something way out in front of her nose. She reached out and touched it. Ouch! It was her nose. Her nose! That was her nose going way out in the air. The girl jumped up. She was horrified. She ran into the house calling, "Mother! Father! Look at my nose!" They couldn't believe it. They didn't know what to think. They didn't know what to say, what to do. They thought about their daughter. She was just about the age to get married. Well, who was going to want to marry a girl with a 6-foot nose? Nobody. First thing they did was put her in her room and close the door, and they started trying to get in touch with doctors. They got a doctor who came in. He made a poultice out of some cloth, soaked it in some herbs, and then put it all the way along her nose. Didn't make it any shorter, it just turned the nose red. Well, they called for another doctor, and that doctor came, and he started poking and pushing and poking and pushing and poking and pushing her nose till the whole thing was black and blue. They called another doctor. That doctor opened his satchel, pulled out a big needle, and was just about to give the girl a shot in her nose. She called out, "No!" Well, they sent that doctor home. They did not know what to do. And all they could think of to do was to put out a sign in town advertising that if anyone knew how to cure their daughter of her long nose, he could get to marry their daughter and have half of their money. That's exactly what Badger had been waiting for. He turned himself into a handsome young man with a nice suit of clothes, and the next morning he knocked at their door. "I think I can take care of your daughter," he said. "I know how to cure her. Just give me about 5 minutes alone with her." Well, they were happy to do that. Badger came into the room. He took out his fan. He turned it over to the back side, and he began to fan the girl's nose. She was fast asleep. In about 15 seconds, the girl was cured. She had that cute little button nose all over again. Well, her parents were delighted, and so was the girl when she woke up. And she was pretty happy with the way Badger looked, too. She didn't know he was a badger. She saw a handsome young man who seemed very nice. And Badger, of course, was delighted because he was going to earn a lot of money. He thought he'd take a little rest because he'd had a long day. He walked out of the house and he lay down in the grass. He was feeling very sleepy. The sun was hot overhead, so without really thinking about it, he took out the fan and he began to fan himself. And as he was fanning, he fell off to sleep. So he didn't notice that his nose was growing. It grew out into the air. It grew out through the trees. It grew out through the clouds. It grew out through the Earth's atmosphere and kept on growing and growing and growing until it reached the Milky Way, the galaxy of stars.
It just so happened that on that day there were some men building a bridge across the Milky Way. They were building it with logs.
And they were short just one log, couldn't seem to find it, when what should appear but this long nose that looked just about the right size as a log. They didn't know what it was, but it seemed to fit perfectly. So they tied up that nose with the logs, and they went home for the day. Well, when they tied up the nose, it gave a great big tug at Badger's nose. He woke up, and to his horror, he saw his nose all the way out through the clouds going out into the sky. Badger grabbed that fan. He turned it over and he feverishly began fanning. Well, his nose did start getting shorter, but here's the problem. His nose was tied down way up in the Milky Way. He, on the other hand, was not tied down to the earth. And so, as his nose got shorter and shorter, instead of coming back to him, he got pulled away from the earth, out into the sky, pulled and pulled and pulled, all the way through the atmosphere, all the way through outer space, all the way till he reached that bridge in the Milky Way. And there he stopped. For all I know, Badger is probably still out there, hanging from that bridge in the Milky Way. And you know what? I think it serves him right for playing all those tricks on everybody. Don't you? So, Badger gets his comeuppance in the end. He gets what he deserves. Fairy tale endings are very satisfying. Unfortunately, in real life, not everybody gets what they deserve. But often they do, and it can't hurt to do the right thing. Fairy tales demonstrate very clearly that how we treat others may come back to help us or to haunt us, and that can only make us better people. Other kinds of fairy tales, like say Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo and Sue Boy, or maybe Jack and the Beanstalk, help us develop confidence that we can meet the challenges that life throws at us. So these stories, based in fantasy, really can help us in real life. Thinking about how so many folk tale motifs are found in various fairy tales and myths puts me in mind of a favorite song by Larry Penn called On My Grandma's Patchwork Quilt. You see, back in the day, if you had an old shirt or some old pants or an old skirt and they were getting kind of ratty looking, you didn't just throw them out right away. First, you cut out patches of the good material and you saved them up. And then when you had enough, you arranged them and you sewed them together to make the top of a patchwork quilt. You could use the patches in any combination or form or design. Well, it's kind of like that with folk tales. These motifs of magical tools, transformation, stock characters, they find their way into thousands of different folk tales. And there they combine in various ways to form a kind of unique story design that sparks our imagination. Let me sing you the chorus first so you can hear the words. On my grandma's patchwork quilt, squares of corduroy and silk, red and green and blue and yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. All right, those are the words. I made up some great motions to it so I can play the guitar on the chorus. I'm going to get my wife Vivian up here to help you with the motions. Vivito, you want to come on up here? We'll teach you the motions together, and then as I play the song, she'll do the motions while I play the guitar on the chorus. Starts out with a pair of glasses for Grandma. On my grandma's, patch on your fanny because you wear it out sitting on it all the time. And then quilt like you're sewing. All right, so on my grandma's patchwork quilt, make a square with your hand. Squares of corduroy, those groovy pants that keep you warm in the winter. Corduroy and silk, nice and smooth. Red like this, like you're stopping traffic. Red and green, waving traffic on. Red and green and blue, blue sky. And yellow too, that's my favorite part. And yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. You got it? All right, Vivian will help you with the motions while I play the guitar. On my grandma's patchwork quilt, squares of corduroy and silk, red and green and blue, and yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. Just a patchwork quilt so fine, it was an art of her design. A piece of sister's dress next to Grandpa's vest, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. Here you go, ready? On my grandma's patchwork quilt, squares of corduroy and silk, red and green and blue, and yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. I got a pillow for my head, and it wants to be my friend, but nothing keeps me warm in a thunderstorm like my grandma's patchwork quilt. Here you go. On my grandma's patchwork quilt, squares of corduroy and silk, red and green and blue, and yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. Now my grandma's gone to rest, and her quilt is all that's left. But her love, I swear, is in every square of my grandma's patchwork quilt. Last time on my grandma's patchwork quilt, squares of corduroy and silk, red and green and blue, and yellow too, on my grandma's patchwork quilt. Said on my grandma's patchwork quilt. Well, thank you so much for listening and joining in this concert celebrating imagination. I've had a great time doing it. Vivian has too, and we hope that you have as well. Stay safe and healthy and keep reading and imagining. See you soon.